How's it going, Jack Tackers, and welcome back to another video for you guys. Today, I'm going to be doing my review for Barry Season 4, Episode 7, which was titled A Nice Meal. And this, of course, is the penultimate episode of the series. I can't believe it. This season's flown by. And let's just say this episode sets up the finale perfectly. And it sets up a very kick-ass finale because I am so excited to see how this series wraps up. And the way this episode ends, just, man, yeah, it excited the hell out of me. And overall, I just thought this was a fantastic episode. Of course, it really just laid the groundwork for a perfect series finale, while continuing some of the stuff we've been seeing earlier this season, of course. But it starts off with Barry being tortured by Jim Moss in his garage, where we left off at the end of episode 6. Now, I will say, this episode started off incredibly intense. Actually, it was quite scary, and I needed some comedy, and thankfully there actually is some great comedy in this episode, especially some of the stuff with Fuchs and his crew talking about like the Fast and Furious movies and all that. We'll talk about that a bit later in this review, but it really started quite intense and scary, and I actually thought, when Jim Moss said that he cut off Barry's arms and legs, I believed him. I thought he was telling the truth. And then, of course, it pans out and we see that Barry's pretty much fine. He has some like VR goggles on and like apparently a ketamine drip. I saw someone on Twitter say that. I didn't know exactly what that IV drip thing was, but I think it was probably lacing his body with ketamine, making him have some crazy hallucinations and stuff like that, which makes sense why Barry was kind of seeing like the beach that we saw back in season 3 and seeing obviously John, his son, in those kind of like weird dreamlike hallucinations. But yeah, the episode started off crazy, man. It about gave me a heart attack, but thankfully it kind of eased up on us just a tiny bit because Barry basically ends up escaping once Jim learns about the $250,000 that Barry gave to Gene, because now Jim is super sus about Gene and thinks that Gene had a big role in Janice's murder, which obviously we know that he didn't. And it's a very tragic situation right now because Gene kind of reverts to his old ways and is pulled in by this guy who's working on the Barry biopic, the movie, and says that Daniel Day-Lewis is going to be playing Gene. And then he says Mark Wahlberg might be playing Barry, and like these big name actors are really exciting Gene and making him want to kind of go through with this movie. And now he's kind of second guessing himself and his morals a little bit. And we see Gene kind of backslide into his old ways. And it's really tragic because he gets kind of pulled in by this guy. And then we find out it's a little bit of a trick because at the end of the episode, we see Jim Moss and a cop and, his son Leo there in that room. And this was kind of like a big setup because now Jim's like, hang on, Gene, maybe you did have something to do with my daughter's death because of this $250,000. And it's just really unfortunate. It was really sad to see that. But, Gene, he did backslide a little bit. He didn't want to go through with this movie at first, but now it seems like he does. So that whole situation's very crazy. But yeah, as I mentioned, Barry escapes, and we do get a bunch of stuff with NoHo, Hank, and Fuchs, and basically Hank and Fuchs are at war, to put it simply. Hank wants Fuchs dead. He tries to kill him like multiple times throughout the episode. He starts off by sending some of these like highly trained men. Some of them are like ex-military, I think, and they end up getting their heads cut off, and it's hilarious. He gets sent these boxes with their foreheads inside of them, and it was just hilarious. He's like, yeah, it was just funny. He's like, oh, this is going to be a head, isn't it? Then he opens it. It's like, oh, heads. Uh, Very funny, though, in obviously a dark kind of way. And then also they end up going back to his compound and setting like a rocket off to this compound to try and take out Fuchs and his men. That doesn't end up working for them, and it backfires on Hank and his driver because they end up getting shot at. And then they drive down this hill, and while they're still getting shot at, and then Hank, like, apparently his driver gets killed. He talks to Fuchs on the phone. He's like, call them off, call them off. Hilarious, but also super intense because I didn't want Hank to die in that scene, and I was genuinely worried for his safety. I didn't know exactly what was going to be happening in that moment, but luckily he's fine for the most part. And then we see some of the stuff with Sally and John, because NoHo Hank and Sally's story, they intertwine in this episode and they come to a head because Sally and John go to LA and they go to Gene's house, or at least Sally calls Gene on the phone and wants to basically go to his house and meet up with him. But then we see that Hank's men go to Gene's house, and obviously that's where they run into Sally and John because they were already at Gene's house, and NoHo Hank and his men take Sally and John hostage pretty much, and then Hank calls Barry on the phone to let him know that he has his family, and that moment is where the episode basically ends. You know, we see Barry find out that Sally and John are with Hank, and he's like so pissed off, and you can just tell that he's angry, and he might just go full scorched earth, go back to his ways in the season 2 finale when he was just killing all those people. If you guys remember that scene in the season 2 finale, that was really good, and I would like to see something like that happen in this finale. But in terms of predictions for the series finale, no idea. I really don't. A lot of people saying pretty much everyone's going to die. That might be the case. A lot of people might die. But also, I kind of feel like this might be a weirdly happy ending for Barry. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but like I feel like that'd be an incredible subversion of expectations. They might actually end up doing something like that. Yeah, it would just be absolutely crazy. But I loved this episode, of course, and I'm just so interested to see what happens in the series finale. I think it's still only going to be like a half hour. You know, I don't think it's going to be extended. I could be wrong, but I think it's pretty much just 30 minutes, the series finale. And it'll be very interesting to see just how this all wraps up. But I loved the episode. It was fantastic. I am so nervous yet excited to see how it all wraps up. Man, but let me hear your thoughts on the episode down in the comments below. What did you guys think about it? Let me hear your thoughts. Very curious to see what you guys have to say about it and what your favorite part was and all that good jazz in the comments. But yeah, if you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. Check out my Letterboxd and Twitter down in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.